In what is quickly becoming tradition at this point, we are here to talk about, well, Pokemon team building, this time Fire Red and Leaf Green edition. Couldn't find one that was a little better. I tried to grab all the trades, but I'm pretty sure I just missed a few, which is just the way it is. And there's a lot of Johto Pokemon that we're just going to quickly go over at the end. This will be a pretty short list, all things considered. Uh, because a lot of it is very similar to the red and blue list with some updated changes that make it a lot better. But it's it's gonna be a little bit different, but we'll get into it. It's also, I really don't have to like go over like the battles they do good in because I already kind of talked about it, and it's just move pool changes really. But we'll start with the starters. Now the starters have actually gone a very interesting route where they they really don't have a good like offering. Whereas you look back at the original red and blue list I made, uh, they all do good in different facets. They're the best of their types in some way, besides Blastoise being very replaceable, just because it's a water type. But even here, Venusaur is just one of the worst grass types you can actually pick up. If we go and look at like Executor, it's actually very prominent in this game. Victory Bell has a lot more to do. Hell, even Tangela isn't as limited as it once was. It's not a great choice, but it's still there. And that's just to show how Venusaur has really fallen away as a grass type, and that's also with poison type becoming way better. Just for example, Muck is actually able to output actual damage in this game versus the sludge offering it had in the first generation. Tentacruel was prominent. Excuse me, I'm like hiccuping now all of a sudden. But there's a lot of poison types that just kind of do better. Uh, Even Arbok, I would say, has a bit better offering than Venusaur in a lot of cases, and that's because abilities have now been added, which is something I didn't really mention. But it these also happen to be stuck with some of the worst abilities in the game, so hey, that's just the way it is. But we'll get into the first route Pokemon, which where the hell is Pidgeot at? I saw it earlier. There it is. It got moved. Pidgeot is actually kind of noticeable in this game. I like to hate on the Pidgey line because it's really miserable, and that's true for the first two generations, basically. Uh, but it is okay here. It's not going to win any awards. It does still have a shitty move pool, but it has access to some TMs that can kind of make it work. I do want to point out Brick Break is a TM that we'll be talking about specifically because it is available in the department store as well as earlier in the game. There's Secret Power, which is kind of why I'm talking about Pidgeot here in a better light. And there's plenty of other options that I think kind of highlight a more usable faction in Pokemon in comparison to Gen 1. But if I could find Raticate I actually think is one of the more interesting Pokemon that has always been good. Uh, and then it just gets really interesting as you go along because yes, it's just Raticate, right? It's not inherently interesting at first glance, and if you get Runaway, who cares? But Guts is a thing, and with how you can manipulate status a lot more due to how many moves are available, it really feels like this is meant to be a lot stronger, uh, just in general, which is why it's actually pretty successful. I think Eradicate stands out in my opinion from the hundreds of normal types that appear. Though we'll talk about the Safari Zone and the problem with that one. Uh, but another thing I should probably mention before we go farther along is that the Versus Seeker exists in this game, so it means it's actually a lot easier for later game Pokemon to really stand out because the Versus Seeker makes grinding incredibly easy, which is why somehow the bugs get worse over time. Uh, I do want to state for the record that I do think they're both usable. I'm looking for Beedrill. Why am I so low? I think Butterfree is without a doubt the better option. The powder moves just go a long way. And Beedrill doesn't have a Brawly to counter like Dustox did. So it's a little worse. I do want to point out that Butterfree is actually way worse in this game versus Red and Blue by a long shot. One, you have Brock, who actually has rock moves, and the special defense is not your special attack as well, meaning that this isn't the tanky or super powered offensive confusion threat it was early game. It's very limited. And I didn't talk about it in the Gen 2 one, but poison typings super effectives have changed slightly from Gen 1 to 2, which is why Beedrill went down a lot. And it's why here it's ultimately like novelty that could like maybe do some stuff. I mean, it's fine against Erica, but it's always like half the planet. But then you go to the left and you get I was gonna say Spiro, but we're looking for Firo on this list. You get access to it, and it kind of does the same thing as it always does, except in this game, personally, I happen to think it's one of the worst outings because of the post-game options. Not in Pokemon, but that trainers are going to use against you. Firo already starts to fall behind in the original Red and Blue by the time you get to the Elite Four. It doesn't do enough damage, and it's just like a somewhat fast attacker that does minimal damage to stuff that walls it. So when it comes down to it, it's actually not the fantastic Pokemon you would want. It's still noticeable. It's still a flying type that does good work, but it just happens to be barely better than Pidgeot in some cases. It has the better stab move, yes, but Fly is always going to kind of be there to kind of hold up Pidgeot, and against in-game AI opponents, it's not a bad option. So Firo doesn't really get to be the success that once was, which is really sad because Firo only goes down as time goes on. We get access to Mankey, which is pretty prominent. Primeape is very special here because its ability doesn't really matter that much, but it does have a very special note, being that it is a fighting type, which isn't great at first glance, but it's an early fighting type, means it's able to hit Brock really well. It By the time you get there, it should be decent against Surge, because electric types are mostly frail in this generation. It does okay against Misty and Erica. It's just some resistances, so you kind of have to use its normal offerings. But it then gets bodied by Sabrina and kind of not trashed, but like unable to do a lot against Koga. But after that, it becomes a much better like Pokemon. One, it does good against Blaine because it's a fast physical attacker that has access to either Rock Slide by Tutor or Earthquake by TM, and it goes against Giovanni decently because a lot of the Pokemon he uses can get punished by fighting type moves, specifically the Rhydon. And the Dugtrio will not live a fighting stab at all. But it gets better as you go. One, it does really good against Lorelei. It's one of the best options, actually, against Lorelei, in my opinion. It does okay against Bruno, specifically the Onyxes into the fighting types. It can usually outspeed and do quite a bit of damage if you need it to. And also in this game, it doesn't have a great matchup against Agatha, but it's not totally useless, which goes into Lance. And at first glance, you think Lance would be like, it's just over. But with access to Rock Tomb, it's not necessarily a bad option. It's not going to win any awards. Hey, I spoke it once. But it does okay against your rival. And as you get to the post game, it actually counters your rival's Tyranitar, which is actually a big threat. It's one of those ones that I think is relevant. I don't know why Poliwrath is so messed up here, but this goes into the Nidos. I think Nidos have definitely been lowered by one, the poison type being just getting better by themselves, and while they are good ground types, the TM compatibility thing isn't as big of a deal in this generation. Yes, having like Thunderbolt and all of this is really cool, but it's not anything too impressive. I do want to state they're probably more noticeable than the other two starters, but it's a close call. I could definitely see maybe a push for interesting, but I just think by the time you're into the late game, they're weak to too much. You're weak to half the gym leaders, basically. I mean, you do good against Brock, but you get trashed by Misty, like straight up trash. Water Pulse is really triggering. You do good against Surge, but Erica does fine against you unless you teach the Ice Beam, which at that point there's so many other options that also do good. Sabrina trashes it. Koga is fine because Levitate exists, but it's also like not good. So it's more like positive, but not great. I think Blaine actually does really good against the Nidos. The Fire Blast hurts, basically. And Giovanni, of course, has super effective on it and actual ground moves, which is really hurtful. And I think the rival just trashes it as time goes on. Lorelei, of course, wins. Agatha has Levitate, and I think the only thing you can actually hit with like your ground stab, which you need to teach by TM, is Arbok, who is going to intimidate you anyway. And Bruno, yeah, I guess you do well against Bruno. Cool. So it's half the planet. Lance, I think, wins, and I've already said about the rival. I don't think the Nidos are as good as they once were by a long shot. They are strong. I'm not saying they aren't, but against the big fights, not really. I think that covers all the beginning stuff, unless I'm missing something. I'm pretty sure that's all before Brock, right? I feel like I'm missing something specific. Spiro, Mankey. I guess not, maybe. Excuse me. Oh, Pikachu. Raichu. I forgot about that. Light Ball is, I don't think is actually accessible in this. But one of the more interesting facets about Raichu, making it one of the more powerful options you can pick up early, is Brick Break is available, and it's not like you're sacrificing a lot to give it to it. And so when it has access to one Thunderbolt by level up really early, by the way, it's like 26, I think, as a Pikachu, or 23, something. It's really powerful. And two, access to Brick Break late, it actually becomes a decent counter to a lot of weird Pokemon. It's not the greatest in any of those stats, but as a electric type, it does good damage through that, and then it has a couple moves that can make it stand out, which is all you kind of want with a mixed attacker like Raichu is. It's not great, but it does its job, which is also similar to Charizard, but there's a better fire type in my opinion as we go along. Also, I do want to note that Static is not that great of an ability, but it is better than freaking Blaze, so there you go. I think that was Raichu, and we go north, and then we go east. I think Wigglytuff is technically next, which is W. Wigglytuff kind of suffers more and more as time goes on of just it being replaceable. It's not, like, its health sponginess is unique in this game, but it's also not that useful. Like, because of the post game you get up to into the 70s, it's definitely not going to make it there, which means it falls behind a lot more. And at the same time, TM compatibility, as I said earlier, isn't that big of a deal anymore. TMs and movesets have been changed a lot where it's not as prominent, which is really weird because this used to be back in, Red and Blue, pretty high up, but early Moonstone doesn't mean much, at least not to Wigglytuff. Which goes into the biggest travesty that is Fire Red Leaf Green, that being Golbat. We have talked about Golbat because Crobat ultimately is not available until late game. And by that, I mean post game. So cool, locked. But when it comes to Golbat, it actually has some noticeable matchups. One, you catch it, and it doesn't have the greatest of standings against Misty, but it's pretty fast and can do some stuff. Surge, of course, trashes it, but does well against Erica. Does well against Sabrina because it's actually pretty fast, and if you're... It might not outspeed the Alakazam, but it should outspeed the others, and it does great physical damage. It starts to fall behind as you go, but it does good against Koga. Blaine is kind of neutral, and it actually does okay against Giovanni. Of course, the Elite Four kind of trashes it, but hey, it does enough to where I think it's okay. And if it was a Crobat, it would have the stats to make a lot more of a presence, and it would probably be an interesting. But hey, Fire Red Leaf Green, thank you for ruining life. We have Graveler, wherever the hell that may be. I can't use alphabet while I'm talking. Use the alphabet. Why am I in O's? Where the hell is Graveler? Is there no Graveler here? Oh no, do I have to use the trades? That's so bullshit. I should have thought this through. Okay, well, we're going to talk about these. This is not Golem, it's Graveler in this case. No trades are accessible. It sucks. Graveler kind of gets bullied this whole entire game. It appears Misty trashes it. Yes, it's good against Surge, but so is any ground type. Uh, and it kind of just continues to be trash. Even Koga, I don't think is a great matchup. And while Blaine out on paper seems fine, you're getting hit by Fire Blast, which is just a burn waiting. It does not have a great time. I think its best shot is maybe against Agatha, but even then, I wouldn't say it's a good one. A very replaceable, a little better than Wigglytuff though. Which goes into Parasect, right? Parasect? Huh. Another Spore user. It's a little better in this game, but it's pretty mid. It's another bug type that doesn't get a lot. It would eventually get a little bit better as time goes on, but it still never is going to get above replaceable, so it's easy to put in mid without thinking. Clefable is here as well. Clefable, of course, gets to kind of keep its slot as being a great utility knife. The only problem that exists with this is the normal type offering moves are pretty limited, but it does have access to a decent fighting type move for once. In Brick Break, it of course gets Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, whatever you want. Psychic is available as well. Shadow Ball, so it can counter stuff if you want. It's really a good utility knife. But it's not super special anymore. It's not as good as it once was in Red and Blue, where it kind of can fit on any team. Yes, there's normal typing, and yes, TM compatibility makes it go a long way, but it isn't the end-all be-all it once was. I think that's everything in, not Rock Tunnel, in Mount Moon, right? I feel like I'm missing something, but I think that's it. So we go east and we get to talk about Arbok. I think Arbok is actually a very interesting Pokemon, and I'd argue it's one of the better offerings that Arbok will ever get. It's very interesting. I'm going to put it here. 1, Intimidate. We've already talked about this in a previous video. Intimidate is one of the best abilities ever. 2, Sludge Bomb is really, really good. 3, Poison typing is not a death sentence as it once was. Yes, you're not good against Sabrina. It sucks. But you are good against most other offerings. I do think it has a kind of a point to succeed, specifically with Acid against Misty. But I really think this starts to get put together with Surge. It will usually be able to use Dig, which it then can do quite a bit of damage. Its attack stat at that point is actually decent and impressive. At the same time, it does good against Erica. It doesn't really do good against Sabrina. We've already talked about this, but I think it does good against specifically Koga. 1, it can learn some really weird TMs, and also its level of move pool will allow it with Glare and Bite to do decent. It's not going to win any awards, as I've already said, and I've said that a lot recently, but it does enough, and I do think it does okay against Blaine. And while Giovanni kind of wins, it's still one of those things where I think this is the best showcase Arbok will ever get. It doesn't do amazing against the Elite Four. I do think it has something to be said against Bruno, but I mean, so as I said earlier, so does a lot. But yeah, I do think this is Arbok's best showcase of being a good poison type. And we can even see, technically, Nidoking and Nidoqueen, without ability coming in, is the better Pokemon, just with typing and so on and so forth. But Arbok with Intimidate, it just goes the extra mile, and I think that's impressive. We have Sandslash, which sadly doesn't get a lot of use. I really wish Sandslash would have. But it's definitely a ground type that's just replaceable. We'll talk about it. Ground types don't really get a lot of mileage. It's just kind of sad. I could see the argument for noticeable, but I don't know, with the TM compatibility problems, move pool problems, it's probably one of the worst move pools on this list. It really just gets punished hard. If you go north, you get access to Alakazam, which is going to be Kadabra here. This happens to be one of the places that Alakazam just shines really well in Kadabra, but Kadabra starts to fall apart really hard in the post game. It already starts to fall apart at the Elite Four, but in the post game it gets countered a lot more by dark types, and the steel types that were not there anymore are now everywhere. It only had to deal with Magnemites and Magnetons, which it could kind of bully through in the main game, but with access to that, it kind of starts to fall. I still think it's probably better than most of these offerings as a special attacker, as a Kadabra, but it's definitely very hard to like determine to me. I am going to put it here because Synchronize is actually a decent ability, and at the same time, its speed tier and special attack is just fine. Doesn't have a great move pool, but hey, it does decent. Next, we should have Oddish, which goes into Vileplume. You get access to a decent amount of moves. I've talked about this before. I'm going to be the guy to say it. I think Vileplume is actually a little bit better in this generation. It happens to be that Venusaur just sucks. And that's basically it. Petal Dance actually is a better grass move, but it's still a grass poison type. It's not going to be winning anything, which sucks because Victory Bell is here as well, I believe. Yeah, Victory Bell is just a better showcase. I actually think it's definitely top of noticeable as a poison type, and the grass typing is what holds it back. Really good physical attacker with mixed attack offerings because the grass type in this generation, no physical special split yet, but it does good enough to really succeed. So I think Victory Bell goes there. I feel like I'm missing something else north of Cerulean, which is bothering me. Technically, Magikarp is available, so we'll talk about that. I did forget to mention. I talked about it in Hoenn, how it gets enough physical attacking options. It's weird because this is one of the better water types in some degrees, but in Kanto, where there's so many water types, it doesn't really get to do much. I do think it's pretty much below Blastoise, and I could even see this as an argument. I'm going to give Vileplume the credit it deserves here. Gyarados just doesn't have the move pool yet. It's still good. It's still a great physical attacker you can get early, and its stats don't run out at the post game. But the weakness to electric types is actually a big problem. You're using a lot of TMs on it to make it the best Gyarados it can be. It doesn't really succeed sometimes. Which goes into technically Meowth is next, Persian, right? Yeah, for some reason. By the way, I kept looking at Ninetales. I was like, okay, N-O, N-O. I did that like 3 times. Persian has been neutered. It's not as good as it once was. Insta critical slash was a thing of beauty, but being a Pikamon's interesting for berries, I guess, and I don't know if you would really want that as ability. And its move pool is not bad. It does have decent stats all around the board. It's a decent fast normal type that I think has a little more use than Wigglytuff in the normal type department, but it's definitely why go for it scenario. Next we go south. I don't even remember what's south to Vermilion. I don't remember what's north of that. Farfetch'd is technically available, so we'll talk about that. But I think we'll go east afterwards. Where's Farfetch'd? F. Thank you. But Farfetch'd really sucks here because you would want to think it's good, but it's just a neutered version of Furo, which is already not fantastic. I do think as a flying normal type, it's interesting. Swords Dance, of course, is always good, but it's not going to win anything too special. I'm trying to avoid that. I keep dancing on the line there, but next we go east and we get to talk about Hypno, which used to be one of my favorite Pokemon back in Gen 1 days, but it is very replaceable. It's one of the better replaceable mons. It's a decent mixed attacker, access to normal, fighting, and psychic type moves. But Psychic has been pushed later into the level up move pool, and while Hypnosis is important, there's a few sleepers that are available that, or not you, Vileplume. There are a few sleepers I think stand out a bit better, which really sucks because I think Hypno at one point would have been probably like top 5 in game because Hypno was just super strong as a psychic tech, especially since we're talking about Kadabra, but it can't hit that hard, which is ultimately its issue. It starts to fall behind too hard. Just to give an idea, in Red and Blue, it had like 50 more special, I think, or almost 50 more special, and it started to fall behind at the Elite Four. without that special bonus, yes, it can tank, and yes, it has hypnosis, but it still can't do much. That's the big problem. Uh, Next, we go and talk about Duck Trio, which is here. Duck Trio actually gets to be a very interesting thing. You think Arena Trap would be like really good in game, but AI doesn't switch a lot. But because of revenge killing and sometimes if you're like walled, this is actually a really good Pokemon. I don't think it hits that hard, but it's definitely better than its offerings in Red and Blue. I think it just does a bit better. Its level up move pool is a little more fair to early game, which is where it can really stand out. And its fast just abilities do physical attacks is enough to win over several badges. One, it trashes Surge. We all know this. Sabrina does well. Koga, it does okay because Levitate exists. And Blaine, it does good, but Intimidate. Did I say? I said Levitate. Levitate for Koga, Intimidate for Blaine. And I actually do think it does decent against Giovanni because of the Nidos. I want to say it's noticeable, but it's mostly because of the speed and the ground typing that I think it goes here. I think the Nidos have a little bit more going for them, which is, kind of depressing actually. But next we go into Rock Tunnel. I think we have access to Voltorb actually before that. So Electrode. Electrode gets a little bit of a better showcase than it once did in Red and Blue. I think it got outclassed so easily, but it's a fast electric type. Thunderbolt is available, and it does learn enough to do okay. It's not gonna win any awards. Again, I'm saying this a lot. God damn it. But I do think as a fast special attacker, it does okay. We go into Rock Tunnel. We have access to one Machoke specifically. Machoke gets a lot here. One, access to Guts, and it uses it a lot better. Without the Machamp evolution, though, it is kind of stuck into the noticeable tier. I do think it happens to stay here. Even as a Machoke. If it was Machamp itself, the bonus attack, bonus survivability, probably be an interesting. But hey, that's the way trades break. Onyx is of course available, and it's actually even more replaceable than it once was. I'd even argue mid at some point, but its level up move pool allows it to do okay. Next we have access to, technically we don't have access to Ghost, but we'll talk about it here. Yeah, so Gengar, or specifically Haunter, has an even worse option than a worse option than it once did in Gold, Silver, Crystal, which is really, really sad because it didn't have access to Ice Punch. It was limited to basically a really bad Shadow Ball and Thunder. That's all it really had. It did eventually get Psychic if you used it enough all the way through, but Haunter doesn't get that much better stuff to really succeed. Yes, Thunderbolt is a thing, and Psychic is easier to access, but you are throwing away 2 TMs on it, and it's not the best at what it does. It is interesting just because of the ghost typing, but it's always going to fall behind because of Haunter. If this was Gengar, it probably could go to super special because Gengar has enough special attack and enough speed to do what it does. And Levitate is busted. I'm actually, as I think about this, maybe I was putting too much credit on Gold, Silver, Crystal. Yeah, we're going to put this higher. I think even as a Haunter, it's really good. Yeah. What are we at? We're at that. Oh, let's talk about one of the best glow-up mons in existence. This requires a bit of work, but because the Versus Seeker exists, I'm sure you'll be fine. You are going to be looking for a thick club eventually, and even if you have to wait for decent into the game, I still think Marowak himself, by the way, I've been looking this entire time. Where's Marowak? There it is. I happen to think Marowak is really, really, and I do mean this legitly, really good in Fire Red Leaf Green. Just to give an example, you get access to Boomerang, so you don't even need to use what's it called? Earthquake. You don't need to use Earthquake on it if you don't want to, but it just does enough of everything to really succeed. As a ground type, one, it has all the bonuses I've talked about with ground types, but it just hits so hard with Thick Club. I think it's Boomerang around 25, so it'll get it before Marowak. I think it's 25. It might be a little later. But it also gives access to one Rock Slide, which is by Move Tutor, and it gets access to Brick Break. You could do Iron Tail. Even if you want to throw out some really wacky moves, because Marowak is not that bad on the special attacking side. It's not good. I'm not going to sit here and say it's fantastic, but 50 special attack is enough to do decent quad super effective. It's a decent Ice Beam user. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but Aerial Ace also exists. As you go along, I do think Marowak is just one of the best Pokemon you can be using as a physical attacker. And as we talk about, as you'll see with Fire Red Leaf Green, there's not that many super special Pokemon. And so I have to give Marowak a lot of credit. Which goes to the west, and we get to talk about another super special Pokemon. And it's not because of its typing, it's because of everything around it. So we'll talk about Ninetales real quick before we go into it. Ninetales, of course, got neutered. We've talked about this already in Gold, Silver, Crystal, and Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. We talked about how it just doesn't do enough damage. It has a decent move pool. Dig is available here. It can do okay. Fire Blast is fine. But fire types aren't a great matchup for most of the game. So it kind of gets left into just the uncertainty tier, really. The difference here is Arcanine is one of the best physical attackers you can have. It's very arguable whether it deserves to be here, but I think if you do it correctly with its decent special attack, its great physical attack, Intimidate access, or even Flash Fire is an argument to be made. TM compatibility just being perfect, move pool being good. You have access to Flamethrower, whether it's the level up way, or you evolve it and you can get access to extreme speed. It has Bite as a usable move. Dig is there. It just has enough to really succeed and push it into just being good. Intimidate's already a valuable ability that pushed Arbok into interesting alone. When you get an actual good Pokemon that's good for the rest of the game, whether it has bad matchups or not, it really does bring a lot to the table, especially as a fire type. Fire types kind of get their glow up in Generation 3. It just sucks that Kanto isn't the greatest matchup for them. But just to give an example, you're doing really good against Erica. I actually think you do good against Sabrina in a lot of cases. You do good against Koga. And if you have Dig, just the Intimidate and doing whatever you want, you do good against Blaine. Yes, of course, you struggle with Giovanni. And, Lorelai's a little mix. But it does good against your rival depending on what you're doing. And Bruno is the struggle here, but Intimidate as a switch out option is always amazing. You have Agatha, where I think it actually does amazing. Excuse me, I had like a hiccup that like made it sound really weird. But you then go against Lance, which again, Intimidate is valuable, and it just does enough. And I think even in the post game, it still has enough of its stats to do really well, which is amazing. I honestly think it's really amazing. Next, you go into Celadon, and we're going to be talking about the evolutions. I am just going to put all the evolutions in S. This is supposed to represent that Eevee is in S, because I couldn't find that. Where's Flareon? I saw it. It was like right... Yeah, here it is. And then Vaporeon's like last. But it's supposed to represent just Eevee up here. Eevee is one of the best options. Jolteon is really strong in this game. Jolteon is just insane. I do think Vaporeon is also really, really powerful. Flareon is probably noticeable. Flash Fire is enough to do okay. It does hit pretty hard physically, but it just doesn't have the move pool to sustain itself. Vaporeon, Water Absorb is insane with all the water types that we'll be talking about in a little bit. Plus, it has a decent TM compatibility, and Jolteon's the best one because it's 1, Volt Absorb, really cool, and 2, it just hits like a truck. Even with it, if you're stuck with just Thunderbolt, you could go Thunder, but Thunderbolt is enough to just clear the game. It's obviously one of the better options. I will state for the record, though, that Eevee would probably be like in the middle, but I am going to leave these 3 at the bottom because it's really unfair. Next, we have access to Doduo? So Dodrio? Technically, I've missed a couple Pokemon. I get it. but I'm trying my best. Dodrio gets a lot more in this game. One, steel types are not problematic, really, as they once were. And also at the same time, it comes early enough to really stand out. It does eventually start to fall behind, as I've talked about in Red and Blue specifically. But when it comes to the post game, it still has some decent matchups. It's going to fall behind. It's not going to be great. But as a flying normal type, I think it's always going to lead the noticeable tier. It's just a great Pokemon to have, just in general. Which I think goes into some fishing we can do, right? Um, hmm. How do I want to do this? Yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll do fishing before Safari. So we have a lot of fishing things. I think Cloyster is not that great of a Pokemon. It's water ice, which, as we talk about later in generations, ice is not that great of a type. Physical bulk is also kind of a very crowded thing, especially with Intimidate kind of being more just useful. Uh, I do think it is definitely up here, but that happens to be because it actually has like a decent enough move pool, and Surf is available and it's actually able to hit decently. It's not going to win any awards again for the billionth time I've said that, but A, it does enough. We go into. I'm just going in. Technically, Jinx is also available. Golduck, I think, is locked into Safari in this game. I don't think Psyduck is outside of it, so we'll talk about it with the Safari Pokemon. We'll talk about Jinx here because you can actually get Poliwrath. Uh, Jinx is good. It has a little worse offering as a Psychic type, but that's because Psychic types kind of fall behind really hard in the post game. It's still good as an Ice type, but it's just also frail, which is starting to get really, really bad as time goes on. I do want to state it's probably like right here in noticeable. It's a really good team member, but it's not too special. We have Water Absorb, Poliwrath, and with access to Brick Break, this Pokemon is a really good mixed attacker. One, you're going to be Surf, Brick Break, Hypnosis. You could do Body Slam if you want. Poliwrath, I think, is one of the best Pokemon to ever be kind of like not used. Not a lot of people will use Poliwrath in Fire Red and Leaf Green. They have a lot of other water types, and that is a kind of a problem with the water type, is that there's a lot to talk about. Fighting types, though, it doesn't have a lot of issues. And it does have a lot of super effectives with a lot of the gyms and stuff, but its move pool in general just allows it to win. Overall, I do think Poliwrath is top of interest in for sure. Continuing the fishing train. Sorry, I probably should have done this differently. Seadra is generic water. It has access to surf. I think it's probably the bottom of a noticeable. It is a water type. Seeking gets stuck in replaceable. Probably right here. Any other water types that... I feel like I'm missing one. Where's Starmie? Leaf Green exists, right? Starmie. There it is. Starmie happens to be one of the best Pokemon in the game. One, TM compatibility is back in full swing, and it appears just in time to counter everything you ever want. Does it good against Koga, does it good against Sabrina, does it good against Blaine, does it good against Giovanni, does it good against Lorelei because Access Thunderbolt, does it good against Bruno because Psychic / Water, and then you go against Agatha and you're doing good against Lance because Ice Beam, you just do good against anything. I think it's actually one of the best Pokemon available. You are locked to Leaf Green, but hey, them's the breaks. Tentacruel technically appeared earlier. I do think this is a little bit better of an option than it is in Ruby and Sapphire, but it's not that fantastic. You're still stuck with Sludge Bomb not being that good, and its move pool is still not anything more than a water type. It's one of the better water types in this gen, but it's not super special, which is kind of what we're pointed on. I think we're going to talk about Safari Zone now. I think. Technically, we should have talked about the casino as well. I kind of ignored that, so we'll quickly get that out of the way. And this is also a mix of Safari as well. You have access to Scyther. I do think it's a way better option than it once was in Red and Blue. But I don't think it's going to win any awards really. I do think it's for a bug type, it does decent. It that's basically it. But quad weakness to rock really punishes it because there's some big threats that just use random rock moves. Rock Tomb is much more available. Rock Throw is much more available, and I do think it just kind of gets stuck here. It doesn't get to do. It's same with Persian. Like they can't do a ridiculous amount. Pinsir, on the other hand, as we'll talk about, is because Heracross is not here to overshadow it. It's actually one of the better Pokemon to use in really weird cases. One, if you are playing, I think it's Leaf Green gets Pinsir in the casino. Uh, if you are playing Leaf Green, you can go and pick this up, and it does good against Erica. I think it does good against Sabrina personally. Koga, it's not the greatest match, and Blaine, of course, is not great, but I think it just does good against the rest of the team, rest of the game. Lance is a little bit of a problem, but it has enough of normal fighting moves to really just kind of do well. It's not going to do great against Agatha, but it does have access to like move tutors and TMs enough to do okay, which is enough for Pinsir to kind of succeed. Which is really weird because Pinsir doesn't. It usually gets overshadowed by Heracross, which is really sad. But and then the other, technically it's in the casino, right? It might only be Safari Zone. Dragonite is, again, we get to talk about it because it's a pure dragon type. Uh, I'm going to put it at top of interesting. Pure Dragon, it resists a lot. There's a lot more counters to it than there were in specifically like Gold, Silver, and Crystal. But because you're going to get a Dragonite for post game, it's actually a very dominant threat. Wing attack also with stab just means this does good. It's also a decent special attacker, which is great. We're in Savari Zone. I forgot about Kingler, by the way. Kingler, one more generation, it would have been great. But I actually think Kingler just gets to stay here. It doesn't have a great ability, but it's physical attack and just being fast enough to do enough is okay. It's not going to like beat out some of the physical attackers down here, but because of its water typing, just being able to go against like stuff that walls it, it's enough. It's just enough, basically. Next we have Golduck, which, yeah. I do think this is one of the better water types, but it's definitely under Tentacruel. Not much to say on that. I think we didn't bring up Porygon. Kind of just replaceable. There's other normal types, which we'll get to in a second. Is Exeggutor. Being a grass psychic type, you think it would be punished harder. There's not a lot of good bug moves. And this is kind of its last hurrah as being a great Pokemon. I think it has access to just enough moves to really succeed. Psychic is a TM which you have to work for, but even such things as Shadow Ball is prevalent. It's a decent mixed attacker, surprisingly, and Giga Drain is in this game for decent work. Yeah, basically, Exeggutor is surprisingly good. What was it? Yeah, we are still in the Safari Zone. I didn't bring up Mr. Mime, by the way. We'll talk about that after Safari Zone. Safari Zone, and we didn't talk about the Hitmons. Excuse me. Or Slowbro. We're really bad at this. Tauros gets to be a pretty good Pokemon because of Intimidate. The problem is normal types aren't as strong as they once were. I happen to think its stats are enough to succeed, but it's not going to be a post-game winner. Which is why Kangaskhan is also going to be quite low. I happen to think Pinsir does a little better in what it's trying to do. Snorlax gets to be a little better than Clefable in this department, but it just doesn't have the speed to really matter in the post game. It still is going to live and do damage, but it's not going to be the one you want. It's a good tank, and that's great, but like Clefable, it does fall behind a bit. The other normal type being Chansey, I couldn't find it. But Chansey gets to, of course, just be a special wall. I think it has way less use than it once was. As a normal type for in-game teams, it's really hard to put to words, and it's very replaceable. But Blissey is okay. But you don't get it for post-game. Woo! Love this game. Slowbro. Talked about how Water Psychic is really good. This is a little less of a good offering, but I do think Slowbro is definitely up here. One of the better water types and one of the better psychic types, which is really, really impressive. Has physical bulk. It just trades its speedy offense for the ability to always live a hit and hit back. It's not going to... Starmie, of course, is the better option, but you wouldn't be at too big of a loss with Slowbro. The speed hurts. Uh, and then who else did I miss? The Hitmons. Hitmonlee is actually really, really good in this generation. Hitmonlee has enough learn set to really succeed as a fight type. I talked about how fighting types don't get to like come out here and do well, but here it just has enough, and it's mostly about the post game or even the Elite Four because Rock Tomb exists and you can do Earthquake stuff. Hitmonlee just happens to do good. It's definitely the worst here because fighting type isn't amazing, but I do think it has enough attack and enough great matchups and really weird fights to be good. Hitmonchan, on the other hand, Brick Break is available, and it has like Mach Punch, so it is noticeable, but without a big backbreaker of a move like High Jump Kick, it's not fantastic. I do think it's a little worse than Primeape. Primeape is fast and has access to Cross Chop, which means it can do a ridiculous amount of damage, whereas Hitmonchan just can't. Which really sucks because Hitmonchan's getting close to one day being better, kind of, not really. But yeah, that's for that. I think we are on to Surf, right? So we're going to talk about the Power Plant, which is very interesting. We, of course, have... I want to talk about the more important Pokemon with Magneton. Magneton is one of the best Pokemon. One, you're going to be using Electric Normal. You are walled. But ignoring that, it's one of the best special attackers. And at the same time, it does really good against the Elite Four. Like, insanely good. Lorelei, of course, it shits on. Bruno, it doesn't do good, but hey. Agatha, it does great. Lance, it does great, besides a bit of certain like moves getting through it. And your original rival fight, it does great against that. It's honestly a really good Pokemon. It doesn't do good against the gym leaders. In fact, it does bad against 8, 7, and... Well, when can you get this? It does good against the rest. Besides... Yeah, it does good against the rest, so... ignoring that, I think it just does good. Magneton's really good. Electabuzz is a lot more of a useful Pokemon than it once was. Gain access to Psychic. It can also learn Brick Break. Again, it's just a better Raichu, except Raichu appears early enough to get some use out of it. I'm going to put it here. I do think missing out on the Misty counter is really important. And missing out on basically the first 5 gyms. You could skip Sabrina and leave it, but why? You're not going to do that much with Thunder Punch or Thunderbolt. So yeah, you're stuck with Blaine, Giovanni, which Giovanni wins. Does good against Lorelei, and basically the same thing Raichu does. A little bit better stat-wise, but doesn't have the early game to make it any more interesting. In fact, I would probably put it a little bit lower, because it comes too late for electric type at that point. When Raichu's right there, Jolteon is already available, and Magneton's in the same spot, and it does something different. So, yeah. Zapdos technically also appears here. It's an electric type that also gets walled similarly to Magneton with legendary stats, so it is going to be super special. What else am I missing here? The fossils. Amistar and Cobbleptops kind of get the short end of the stick by being worse than they once were. They're still decent. Rock Slide is available for them, but again, they just don't really get off the ground. I think their stats are a little better than that, though. I think I'd probably put them like below Gyarados, above Venusaur. Venusaur gets shafted so hard. Amistar is a little worse, though. I'd probably put it like here. This is also very insulting to Furo. There we go. Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl gets a lot of options in this game. One, Wing Attack is available, and it just can do a great amount. It's a fast rock flying type. I'm going to have to organize this a little bit. I think some of these are going to come down, but we'll organize as we go. I forgot about Lapras. Lapras, of course, has Water Absorb. I've already talked about the Bolt Beam combo. It has access Body Slam. Really, really good water type. has the stats to stay into the post game. It's not going to be one-shotting as much as it once did, but it does good. Which goes into Dugong's technically available. It has a direct replacement in Lapras, but it's actually really good. I'd probably put it like right here because this is Machoke. Probably a really good option. Articuno is technically available at this point. It's not a great thing. Post game it does good, but that's because it's a legendary. It's interesting for being ice type and flying type, but its stats aren't great physically. It doesn't get a lot of great options. It's definitely better than Kingler, but very much a haphazard. It's a haphazard better. Didn't talk about Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime was one of the best Pokemon in the game. Psychic, Magical Leaf, and just everything it can learn by TM. This is one of the best. We'll have a lot of organization as we go. Moltres gets a little bit of a better stand-in by appearing before Giovanni in this game and not being just available for the Elite Four. Post game, it also can do some work. I happen to think it does okay. It has a better Fire Blast, doesn't have a better move pool than Charizard, and it appears really, really late. So I am gonna put it probably like right here. It is better than Articuno in my opinion. Magmar, skipped over that, is the fire type that I think does some of the best work. It's not walled as much as some of these, and it just appears too late to be really super special. I'd probably put it right below Charizard, basically. Lickitung, I've talked about before, Lickitung is just bad, and it's very replaceable. Replaceable tier is actually very small. Surprised. Muck. We get to talk about Muck and Weezing. Muck doesn't get the greatness that it should, but it is noticeable. Appears a little too late. Technically, you could get a Grimer and Celadon, I believe. So, it probably should have been up here earlier. I happen to think it does okay. I'm going to put it below Venusaur. But Weezing, Levitate, TM compatibility, appears decently late, and that's kind of where we're going to put it here. It's just a little too late to make a splash a lot of the time. Post-game wise, it does okay as well. We skipped Rhydon for that, which I actually am going to be the one to say this. I think Rhydon's really good for when you get into Safari. I think it's better than Pinsir. Just having dual stab options in this game is surprisingly solid. It's not amazing. There's a lot of water types and ice types and grass types in the post-game, but it's enough damage that I think it can kind of just succeed. Ditto, we also skipped. This gets to be in mid, and it actually gets to be right here. In fact, right here, one of the worst Pokemon. It's even worse than the ones that appear literally in the post-game. But, hey, that them's the breaks. Rapidash. We didn't talk about Rapidash. It gets a little better offerings in this game, but it's still a fire type that's just a little late and speedy. So it actually gets knocked down because it doesn't have the insane TM compatibility or the insane stats. I do think it gets a little okay with Mega Horn, funnily enough. But hey, that's why it's gonna be like right here. Alright, I think we are done. Oh, Tangela. It's okay. It's a lot better than it used to be, but it doesn't have any great moves. I'd probably put it like right here. No, I'd argue like right there. It's barely noticeable. Venomoth I skipped. I think this has a better options than it once was. Powder moves, Psychic, Sludge Bomb, but Venomoth just sadly doesn't have everything put together. Appears quite late, and it's weak to Blaine. It does okay against Giovanni, but it just doesn't have great offerings. It is noticeable, but not great. And yeah, I think that's it. We are in Johto Land. So when it comes down to it, there's a lot of Pokemon that just become available late that are just unusable because they're stat totals, or they're bad typing. So they get unusable. But if they're useful in some regard, at least Ditto can be used sometimes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the stat total just doesn't work out, right? It just doesn't. And so we're just going to put those in basically unusable. Didn't talk about Mewtwo, but we'll get to that in a second. Sadly, Mischievous is relevant. I think Murkrow is really bad. It's one of a dark type, whatever. Uh, I think Sneasel's really bad. Togetic's really bad. Unknown, of course, is literally unusable. Wobbuffet is also really bad. Yanma is probably like right here, honestly. And Zatu, there's so many better options that I'm just gonna put it here. And you know what? There's better options. Dark type in the post game and flying types normally. Um, Quillfish is also gonna go here. Water Ground's unique. I I'm gonna put that there. I'm thinking it over. I think this is fine. All right, let's talk about Mewtwo because I skipped it over. It appears, of course, after the Elite Four into the post game, and so it's a decent little thing, but it appears too late. Uh, it's noticeable for being one of the strongest Pokemon you can have, so it can like go up here, but you're using it for very little time. Next, we get into the legendary dogs, which you can get access to at different times. Uh, Problem is all of the post game as well. I I am gonna order them how I would. I do think the electric type gets a little more use, but water type is just better. Suicune in this case. And when it comes to this, oh, this is also literally unusable. You can't trade. Uh, but let's talk about the actual offerings we have here. Macargo is not good. In fact, I have no idea why I escaped that. But Heracross is. Heracross gets to be one of the better ones. Houndoom is a really good typing for a lot of stuff. Mantine is available, and I do think it's probably in the lower end, but does fine. Misdreavus is a pure ghost type, so it just gets to be somewhere. I think it's better than Blissey in this case. Octillery, sadly, even though it's one of my favorite Pokemon, there's so many better water types. Water ground type actually brings it above Blissey. You have Skarmory, which is one of the few steel types that's really good. In fact, there's two that are available, so it automatically gets to be pretty high up. I think I would probably put it like right here. And Tyranitar is one of the best options you can have as well, which is all the listings. We're going to do a nice little organization spree. I think Starmie's always going to be here. I think Lapras should go higher. I think Mr. Mime goes here. Maybe? Maybe. The grass type hurts. Hitmonlee, I think, is bottom. Alright? Like, I don't think it's... So, I wish I could just put Eevee, but Eevee itself would probably be right here. If this was one, it would be Eevee. I think Arcanine has a little bit more... Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. It's very close to me, in my opinion, for that. I think Aerodactyl's really low for some reason. I think it's probably right there. It's kind of a wall problem, but hey, so does a lot of Pokemon. Yeah, I think that's good. I think this is the highest amount of super special. It's kind of cheating with the 3 evolutions, but even if we take 2 of those out and just say Eevee, we're at 2, 4, 6, 8, sorry, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 Pokemon to be here. I think Hitmonlee might be a little high now that I look at it. I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to do that. I think Dragonite's just better for post game specifically. But Tyra, I'm sticking with that. I think this is pretty good. We see the Noticeable has gotten a way bigger like presence than it once did in Gold, Silver, Crystal. And yeah, we get to see the Kantomons that kind of went up and down to insane degree. These used to be some of the best. Hell, the starters used to be some of the best, but they just aren't fantastic in Kanto. At least in Fire Red and Leaf Green. So overall, that's it. That's Fire Red and Leaf Green's team building. I'm actually kind of surprised. There's a lot of good Pokemon. I love Marowak, so fun. But yeah, not bad and replaceable. And the mid category is mostly filled with post-game garbage. There was the 3 bugs, which technically Onyx could probably be there, but hey, we'll give it some credit. Never mind, changed my mind. But yeah, I really think this is a good team building game now. I don't like Fire Red Leaf Green specifically because like Crobat's blocked and so on and Blissey, but Hey, it is what it is, and I think that's it. I will see you in the next time, which is, I think, Diamond Pearl, and I might separate Platinum out. I'm unsure. We'll see what happens.